So we had a couple of speakers and an amplifier, a cassette deck for background music, and we played, and no one got out of the line. They just did that. They wouldn't come and talk to us and get our music or anything. So we started loading up our car, and someone came running out and said, "Hey, would you like to be on the Tonight Show?" We go, "Well, sure, who wouldn't want to be on the Tonight Show?" Apparently, Johnny had been driving past, Johnny Carson, and told them to come out and book us on the Tonight Show. So here's the sad part of the story. So when we were on the Tonight Show, the Doc Severinsen rehearsed with us with the Tonight Show band, and we had this great arrangement of Flight of the Bumblebee that everyone loved. And so he told us not to play it first. And so we didn't play it first, and he didn't bring us back for a second number. So we missed an opportunity to play our best number. And the Liberace show, when we were doing 150 Liberace shows, the first week we were stopping the show with Flight of the Bumblebee, 2 shows a night in Chicago. And so at the end of the week, the producer says, "You can't play that song anymore because Liberace needs to come back out. The audience isn't letting him come back out because you guys are stopping the show." So that's another sad story. So the reason I'm telling sad stories is because there were other opportunities too, that if we had a break and we become famous, then I wouldn't be promoting the Constitution and suing Congress like I am. Okay, when John F. Kennedy was speaking to a group of Nobel laureates, it was all of the new Nobel laureates of the Western Hemisphere at the White House. And he said to them, "This is the greatest assembly of intelligence and knowledge ever assembled at the White House, except for possibly the exception of when Thomas Jefferson died here alone." And it's like, that's pretty interesting. He had a great respect for Thomas Jefferson and his intelligence. The reason I'm telling that little story is Thomas Jefferson said the only true corrective for constitutional abuse is education. The only true corrective for constitutional abuse is education. So back in about 2010, I heard Barack Obama on national television tell the world that the Constitution, the foundation of it, was fundamentally flawed. And I thought, how does he get away with that? That's not right. So I decided I'd better read the Constitution all the way through. I don't think I'd ever done that before. And as I was reading it through, it was a terribly boring experience, but I got to some certain clauses that really hit home, especially the oath, the executive oath. And I thought, he literally broke his oath as a U.S. Senator. He swore to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And here he was slandering the Constitution. As an attorney, if he were representing someone in court and said that to the judge, he could be fired and he could be sued for malpractice. And I thought, this is just not right. So it got me studying the Constitution. And as I started studying the Constitution, I found things that just kind of blew my mind. Sort of like reading the Bible for the first time. You think, oh, this is going to be boring. When you start finding things that are like, oh my God, that's in the Bible. It's just amazing. And so as I started connecting dots, I thought, this is incredible. But I'm trying to find other people that had found, these same kind of thoughts and thinking. And I didn't find anyone. Finally, I had an opportunity to talk to the owner of the National Center for Constitutional Studies, and they had printed well over 60 million copies of the Constitution. And I said, I think I found some things in the Constitution that I can't find that anyone else has published. Is that possible? He says, well, share with me what you have. And I did, and he says, I've never heard these before either. You're right, we want to publish them too. So put something together that we put with our Constitution book. And later I decided, well, why would I do that? Why don't I just do my own Constitution book and put my discoveries in it? And so I did that. And after I did it, I had some copies, and I thought, now I need to test it to see if people will respond to these discoveries. So a friend let me stand in front of his table at a convention, and I would stop people. And I think about the first person that I stopped, I said to him, sir, I believe that I've discovered some revolutionary things within the Constitution that have never been published before. Testing 1, 2, 3, feedback testing 1, 2, 3. And I said, can I share that with you? And he said to me, he pulled out a pocket Constitution. It was pretty tattered. I could tell this man had read that Constitution. He marked it up pretty good. And he said, you think you can tell me something that I've never heard before, that I haven't read before, that's new? And I said, yes, I think I can. And he says, well, if you can, I'll make a contribution to your next printing, and I'll take one of those copies. So go ahead. I said, well, Okay, let me give it a shot. I said the first 10 amendments were not defined by the first Congress as the Bill of Rights. They were defined as further declaratory and restrictive clauses to the 7 articles of the Constitution. And I said within those first 10 amendments, there's one amendment, a further declaratory and restrictive clause, that tells us that there's only one way to interpret the Constitution. And I call it the interpretation clause. As a matter of fact, when I felt like I discovered this, I felt like it was God speaking. That it was actually God speaking to us and everyone that is connected with the Constitution to interpret it in a strict way. And that strict way is the only way that's legal to interpret the Constitution is a way that supports and defends our unalienable rights that we get from our Creator. And that made so much sense to me. And I said, and it's the 9th Amendment. And I said, and it goes like this. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. In other words, no interpreting the Constitution in ways that would deprive us or compromise our God-given inalienable rights. And he looked at me, he pulled out his wallet, handed me a 20, took a book, and walked away. And I thought, I have something here. Can you hear me okay? Because I hear some okay back there? Okay. So there are other discoveries too. I found that there's a clause in the Constitution that not only defines socialism, this is a special message for Bernie Sanders and others, that not only defines socialism, but prohibits socialism. And it's one of those further declaratory and restrictive clauses. It's the 5th Amendment, last line, that states, nor shall your private property, which I say includes your money, be taken for public use without just compensation. No taking your money or property for public use without just compensation. Now, no, some people that talk to us say, well, just compensation is you get is public use. It's like, no, it's totally separate. When your house is taken for a road, they don't say, now you get to drive on the road, there you pay for it. No. So it's like this creates a problem because it's also the definition of taxation. So did the signers of the Constitution realize what they were signing, or is something really great about this clause? Now, before Tucker Carlson was fired, he said $1 trillion out of thin air. Why are we being taxed for that trillion? And then a few weeks later, I think he was fired. It was pretty quick after that. And then I had a private conversation with Stephen Moore, who was chief economics advisor for President Trump for the first administration in Las Vegas. I was with him. And I said, if we can enforce the nonprofit status of the Federal Reserve System, just in theory, if we can enforce that nonprofit status, not only would it eliminate the federal debt, but it would eliminate the federal liability and the need for taxation. And he agreed with me. So this is pretty hot topic, hot subject. So I thought, oh my gosh, we have a constitution that if we followed, it's a tax-free system. And then I think about the scripture in the Bible where Peter was saying to the tax collector, of course my master pays taxes, trillions, whatever. And then the scripture says that when he came to Jesus, Jesus was watching him, and Jesus rebuked him. And he said, reprimanded him and says, what are you saying, Peter? He says, lest we offend him, go get a coin out of a fish's mouth. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh. So this is another one of my discoveries in this book about socialism, about taxation, and the interpretation clause and more. And so I have this available at my website, 7discoveries.com, and I'm out in where all the tables are. I have these available. And if you didn't bring a credit card or wallet or cash or anything like that, I would just like to give you one for free. But I have that. Now, some of you know about the lawsuit, the federal lawsuit, where I'm the plaintiff suing members of Congress. 2020 election, there was a joint session, and Ted Cruz tried to get more than 145 members, he had 145 members support, to support a simple 10-day pause for investigation, because they had a mountain of evidence proving that there was a need for an investigation. And so those that refused to support that, my brother took a course off of a DVD several years ago, and he learned how to file pleadings in state and federal court. And so he decided that they should be sued. And so after thinking about it for a month, he decided to call me, and he says, these people should be sued. And I says, yeah, that's a good idea. And then he had the brilliant idea of asking me if I would be the plaintiff. So it's like, I said, yes, absolutely, I would love to be the plaintiff. Well, there's a little problem with that. We had to come up with some way to do it, and so it had to be a personal damage claim lawsuit. Well, a personal damage claim lawsuit against the government or government officials, you can't do that. You have to get permission from the government to sue the government or government officials. By the government we have, isn't it? And in order to do that, you have to get permission from the sergeant at arms, and you have to take it to a special claims court. You can't just go into federal or state court. Well, we decided, well, we're not attorneys, so they can't discipline us, and they can't take our license away. And I'm the plaintiff, so what are they going to do, right? What do they do? So let's go ahead and file it. But before we file it, we decided we have to ask for damages. We can't ask for real damages. We have to ask for punitive damages, punishment. So we thought, just at a minimum, it should be $1 million per complaint, per cause of action. So that would be $6 million per defendant, 387 defendants, House and Senate, and Mike Pence, and Kamala Harris, and Joe Biden. But except for 3 of them, the top ones, we decided it needed to be $25 million per cause of action for those 3, which totals $1.9 billion. And so we take this $1.9 billion to state court, and they file it, and they docket it. We're going, whoa, this is such a breakthrough. It's filed and docketed. So on March 31st, I'll cut the story short, on March 31st, 2022, the docket showed that the U.S. Marshals were ordered by the Federal Court of Utah to start serving my summons and complaint to the 387 defendants. And on that date, the docket showed that Maxine Waters, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, and 84 others were served my summons and complaint by the So yes, another breakthrough. So it's like, oh my gosh, what can happen now? Well, the next day, April 1st, they recalled it. The federal court called it back, unfiled my case, called back the service, and docketed as my case as being deficient. I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? Well, we thought we had it in the bag, right? And so we thought, what can we do? Well, we'll complain to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals that the lower court is misbehaving. So we did a writ of mandamus, and we complained to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, and they responded several weeks later with a response that they're not unfiling your case, they're just backlogged. It's like, look at the docket. The docket shows in file. So we thought, what should we do now? My brother says, well, now we sue both courts. We take those 2 courts to a court. Well, what court? Well, the only court we can think of was a state court, a district court, state court. So we go, okay. So we take, now when you interfere with a lawsuit, you can be liable for the monetary damages seeking in that whoever's filing is, they're seeking in that lawsuit, regardless of the merits of the case. So in this case, it was a $1.9 billion case against the federal court and a $1.9 billion case against the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in state court. We thought, boy, this judge is going to have fun with this, right? And so they let us file it and docket it. And then it took a few weeks for the judge to make a decision because immediately the U.S. attorneys filed a motion to dismiss. Meanwhile, my brother had said, hey, I want to do an identical one to yours so we can have, left and right, that's right. And so he said, yeah, let's go for it. So he filed in state court, and the U.S. attorneys were fighting him with a motion to dismiss, and they used some of my information suing the courts. And in their information they were using in the motion to dismiss, they admitted that the courts had filed my case. They contradicted the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals and admitted that they had filed my case. So we immediately took that information and filed a full summary judgment motion against the 2 federal courts because we had absolute proof that they had been filed my case, violating my due process rights, state and federal constitution, to bring action in any court against any entity. So now the judge had an opportunity to become a huge hero and make us rich. We even had a little fantasy, like, what we can do with the federal court building? Well, we can lease it back to them, something like that. So we had a little fun doing that. So finally, the judge just sat on it and sat on it. The U.S. attorneys finally filed a brief saying, look, the Brunsons need to know, we need to know if you're going to move forward with this, and if you're going to move forward, allowing them to move forward with the motion, a full summary judgment motion, we need an extension, because this is going to take some work. And so finally, the judge made a decision and ruled in favor of the U.S. attorneys dismissing my case, motion to dismiss. So we thought, oh my gosh, another wall, another dead end. And so we just kind of were thinking there, but a couple weeks later, out of the blue, the federal court notified notified me that the judge decided to do what we were suing them to do, and he ordered the chief clerk of the Federal Court of Utah to reissue all 387 summonses, and within a few days, the U.S. attorneys accepted the summons and complaint for all 387 defendants. Okay, but it's been denied at the Supreme Court level twice. The second time without a conference. I'm entitled to 2 conferences. So the last few months has been like, what happens now? Well, the U.S. Solicitor General is the one that represents the defendants, the 387 defendants. And guess who the new U.S. Solicitor General is that has jurisdiction over this whole case? Donald Trump's #1 Supreme Court attorney, Dean John Sauer, has become, just within the last few weeks, the new United States Solicitor General. So this is incredible. So what I have here, I'm going to put in just a second. What I have here, I printed a few copies of one of the complaints. The complaints are the same, but this is a summons and complaint. And my favorite one to print off, in case you'd like a copy, is Kamala Harris's summons and complaint. This is the Supreme Court Rule 11, which is the first time they've ever filed one for someone representing themselves. And this is the Supreme Court appeal, and I have some of these in the room at the table too. And then this is my 2025 presidential edition that has my discoveries in it. And so I have that I just got this a few days ago, the coffee table version and the pocket version. And so that's, if you'd like to get a copy, please come and see me. And it's a great boost for me. And thank you for listening. I love you guys.